She stayed. That was the part nobody had planned for. Not Jinwoo. Not his enemies. Not the people currently sitting in very expensive offices across Seoul deciding that a plus-sized black librarian from Los Angeles who had somehow survived a restaurant shooting, a parking garage ambush, and a shipyard war was now the single most dangerous vulnerability of the most feared Mafia heir in Korea. She stayed. And that one decision, made quietly in a safe house kitchen while an elevator door slid shut behind her, had just changed everything. Because here is what nobody told Precious Davis when she chose to stay. Staying wasn't the end of the danger. Staying was the beginning of it. If you watched part 1 and you thought the worst was over, you are so wrong. And I need you subscribed and notified before this story destroys you completely. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the bell. Because part 2 of Precious and Jinwoo starts right now. And I promise you, nothing is what it looks like. 3 weeks after the shipyard. Los Angeles had gone quiet in the way cities went quiet after violence moved through them, not peaceful, just tired. The Kwon organization had dismantled what remained of Han Seo-jin's network with the same cold precision Jinwoo applied to everything. Arrests. Disappearances. Assets frozen and redistributed. The kind of cleanup that happened below the surface of the city's awareness, in languages most people didn't speak, in buildings most people didn't know existed. Precious knew about most of it. Not because Jinwoo told her everything. Because she had started paying attention. She sat at the kitchen island of the penthouse on a Tuesday morning with a coffee she had made herself. Jinwoo's kitchen was extraordinary, and she had decided it was hers now. Reading a book she had actually progressed past chapter 3 of for the first time in months. The city stretched below the massive windows in the particular gold of early Los Angeles morning. 3 of Jinwoo's men were posted outside the penthouse door. Jinho was somewhere in the building. Jinwoo himself had left at 5:30 a.m. for a meeting he had described as administrative. She had learned not to ask about administrative meetings. Her phone buzzed. Vanessa. Precious smiled before she answered. Her cousin had been back in her own apartment for 2 weeks, physically unhurt beyond the bruise that had since faded, insisting loudly to anyone who would listen that she was completely fine and absolutely not traumatized, and also could Precious please explain one more time why there had been armed Korean men outside her apartment building for a week. Good morning, Precious said. It is not a good morning, Vanessa said. It is a confusing morning. A man in a black suit just left a gift basket outside my door. There is a card. It says, and I am reading this directly, with gratitude for your patience. It is signed K. Precious put down her coffee. K. 1 letter. Who signs things with 1 letter, Precious? Who does that? Jinwoo apparently. Silence on Vanessa's end. Your boyfriend sent me a gift basket. He is not, Precious stopped. Considered. He sent you a gift basket. There is a spa voucher in here, Vanessa said. 5 stars. Full day. Precious, this voucher is worth more than my rent. Don't read the amount out loud. I already read the amount out loud. I read it out loud twice. A pause. Precious. Vanessa. What exactly is happening with you and this man? Precious looked out at the city. At the skyline that had become, slowly and completely without her permission, familiar. At the coffee she had made in a kitchen that felt like hers. At the life she had somehow started building in the middle of a war she had never asked to be part of. I genuinely don't know, she said honestly. But I think it might be something. Something, Vanessa repeated. The man has private armored vehicles and sends spa vouchers worth 4 figures, and you're calling it something. Goodbye, Vanessa. I'm booking the facial. She ended the call. She was still smiling when she heard the penthouse door open. Jinwoo walked in at 8:15 looking like a man who had been in an administrative meeting and absolutely nothing else. Dark suit. Perfect posture. Expression neutral. But she had learned his face over the past weeks with the same attention she gave to books, reading between lines, noticing what wasn't said as much as what was. Something was wrong. Not emergency wrong. Not reaching for his weapon wrong. Something quieter than that. Something he was deciding whether to say. You sent Vanessa a spa voucher, Precious said. He set his phone on the counter. She was inconvenienced. She was kidnapped. I'm aware. He looked at her. It was a significant inconvenience. Precious stared at him. The corner of his mouth moved. She had started cataloging those. The almost smiles. The ones that appeared briefly and disappeared before they could be confirmed. She had 17 documented so far in 3 weeks, and she was not going to tell him that. "How was your meeting?" she asked carefully. He looked at her for a moment. There it was. The pause. The assessment. The internal decision. "Sit down," he said. The thing about Kang Jinwoo, Precious had discovered, was that he never said sit down for small things. She sat. He remained standing, which was typical. He processed things on his feet. She had noticed he only sat willingly in 3 situations: when he was exhausted past the point of managing it, when he was eating, and when she was upset about something and sitting would bring him to her level. "There is a development," he said. "A development. Seo-jin is dead." "I know. You told me 3 weeks ago." "Yes." He looked at her carefully. "What I did not tell you is that Seo-jin was not the primary architect of what happened at the restaurant." The kitchen went quiet. Precious set down her coffee cup. "What do you mean he wasn't the primary architect?" "He executed it. The selection. The arrangement. The timing." Jinwoo's voice was precise and even. "But the strategy, the specific nature of it, came from somewhere else." "Where?" He looked at her. "Someone inside my organization," he said. "Someone who has been inside it for a long time. Someone who understood both what would humiliate me publicly and what would create enough chaos to move certain assets during the confusion of the aftermath." Precious heard the words. She heard them individually, and then she heard them assembled together, and the assembled version was considerably worse than the individual words. "Someone used me," she said slowly. "Not just Seo-jin. Someone inside your organization used me as a distraction." "Yes." While something else was happening. 3 asset transfers. During the attack. During the garage ambush. During the shipyard. He paused. Each one timed to the chaos. Each one moving resources to an external account we have only partially traced. Precious was very still. "You've known this for how long?" The pause before he answered told her everything. "Jinwoo. I suspected it during the shipyard," he said. "I confirmed it 4 days afterward. That was 2.5 weeks ago." "Yes. And you didn't tell me." He met her eyes directly. "No," he said. "I didn't." Precious looked at him. At the controlled face. At the dark eyes that were watching her with a specific quality she had learned meant he was prepared for her reaction, but not certain of it. "Why?" she said. "Because knowing would have put you at additional risk." "I was already at risk." "Knowing the shape of the threat changes how you carry yourself," he said. "Changes what you reveal without meaning to. Until I knew who specifically we were dealing with, I couldn't tell you without potentially making it worse." That is the most controlling logic I have ever heard in my life. "Yes," he agreed. "It is also correct." She looked at him for a long moment. "Who is it?" she said. He was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. "We believe," he said carefully, "it is Director Lim." The name meant nothing to her. But the way he said it meant everything. "Who is Director Lim to you?" she asked quietly. Jinwoo turned toward the window. For a moment he said nothing. And in that moment Precious saw something she had seen only twice before, the exhaustion that lived beneath everything else. The specific weight of a man who had trusted the wrong people so many times that trust itself had become a liability. "He has been with my family for 20 years, Jinwoo said. "He was my father's most trusted advisor. When my father died, he stopped. He stayed. He helped me build what this became." A pause. "I considered him family." The word family from Kang Jinwoo landed with enormous weight, because she understood by now what family meant to a man who had almost none. "Jinwoo. We don't have confirmation," he said. "Not yet. I need you to behave as though everything is normal. I need you to trust me while I work through this." "I stayed," Precious said quietly. "That means I'm in this. Not managed. Not protected from information. In it. You understand the difference." He turned from the window. His eyes found hers. And she saw something shift in them. Something real and unguarded in the way he only allowed briefly and then covered again. "Yes," he said. "I understand the difference." "Good." She picked up her coffee. "Then tell me everything." He told her everything. It took 2 hours. They sat across from each other at the kitchen island, him with water he didn't drink, her with coffee she finished and refilled twice, and he laid out the architecture of the betrayal the way he laid out everything, with the precision of someone who had been carrying the weight of it alone and was only now allowing it to be shared. Director Lim, 20 years. The transfers. The timing. The specific intelligence about the restaurant that only someone with internal access could have provided to Seojin. And one more thing. One thing that changed the shape of the entire story. Lim had a contact, Jinwoo said. Someone external. Someone he has been feeding information to for the better part of a decade. He looked at her carefully. That contact has a name. Tell me. Park Hyun-soo. Still nothing. He runs the second largest competing organization in the region, Jinwoo said. He has been trying to absorb my network for 4 years. Every attempt I have blocked. Every approach I have neutralized. He paused. I never understood how he knew to approach when he did. How he always seemed to know which moments were vulnerable. Because Lim was telling him, Precious said. Yes. For a decade. Yes. And now with Seojin gone. Hyun-soo moves directly, Jinwoo said. He no longer needs the intermediary. He no longer needs the misdirection. He looked at her steadily. And he is already moving. The kitchen was very quiet. How do you know he's already moving? Precious asked. Jinwoo reached into his jacket and placed a photograph on the kitchen island between them. Precious looked at it. Then looked up at Jinwoo. That's me, she said. Yes. That was taken. She studied the image. Her. Outside the building. 3 days ago. Going to the coffee shop 2 blocks away that she had decided was safe enough for a solo walk. I thought your men cleared that route. They did, Jinwoo said. Which means whoever took this photograph has access to our security rotation. The implications arrived one by one. Each one colder than the last. He's already inside, she said. He has someone already inside, Jinwoo corrected quietly. Yes. Precious looked at the photograph of herself. At the woman who had gone for coffee thinking she had earned a small, ordinary moment. At the woman who had stayed because leaving felt worse. She thought about leaving now. She was honest enough to sit with that thoughtfully. To not push it away. Then she thought about what leaving actually meant. Going where? Being watched by people she didn't know instead of people she did. Building a life with a name she wasn't born with in a city she'd never chosen. And she thought about the man sitting across from her who had told her everything when he could have told her nothing, who had asked her to trust him while showing her why trust was dangerous, who was watching her face right now with the specific expression of someone who had already prepared for her to go. She pushed the photograph back across the island. What do we do? She said. Something in his shoulders released. Barely visible. But she saw it. We set a trap, he said. The plan was elegant the way all of Jinwoo's strategies were elegant, built on pressure points, on information asymmetry, on the specific human tendency to reach for something the moment you believed it was vulnerable. They were going to make Precious look like a liability. Not just any liability. The kind that made men like Hyun-soo believe they had found the perfect leverage point. The kind that made director Lim believe the moment had arrived to make his final move. They were going to let the enemy believe they had already won. The first piece was a conversation Precious had on the penthouse terrace that she knew was being monitored. Jinwoo had identified the feed 3 days earlier and left it active deliberately. She sat on the terrace with Jinho, who was better at performing a normal conversation than she had expected from a man who communicated primarily through silence and meaningful eyebrow movements, and she talked about leaving. Not dramatically. Not tearfully. Practically. The way a woman who had been thinking about it seriously actually talked about it. I've been looking at apartments, she said. In the valley. Somewhere quiet. I have savings. Not much, but enough to start over. She paused. I think it's time. Jinho said nothing on cue. I love him, she said. And that part required no performance whatsoever because it was simply true and had been true for longer than she had fully admitted to herself. But I didn't sign up for this permanently. I came for one dinner. She looked at the city. I stayed because it felt right. But now, she shook her head. I think I'm becoming a reason for bad things to happen to people around me. And that's not something I can live with. She stood up. Don't tell him I said any of that, she said to Jinho. Jinho gave her a look that said he absolutely would tell Jinwoo everything. She went back inside. Jinwoo was at the kitchen counter with his phone. He looked up at her. Good, she asked quietly. Perfect, he said. The second piece was Jinwoo. He cleared his schedule publicly. Cancelled 3 meetings. Moved a board review that had been on the calendar for months. Then he let it be known, through 2 carefully chosen intermediaries who he knew were compromised, that he was taking Precious away for the weekend. Private residence. Coastal. The address was specific and detailed and entirely fictional. The third piece was Director Lim. Jinwoo invited him to dinner. Not at the penthouse. At a private restaurant in Gangnam that they had used for sensitive meetings for years. Public enough to feel safe. Private enough to be intimate. Precious was not invited. Which was, of course, the point. Because the moment Jinwoo left with Precious for a fictional coastal address, the moment the penthouse was empty and the security rotation was thin and the window that Director Lim had been waiting 20 years to open was finally ajar, that was when they would move. And Jinwoo would be sitting across the table from the man who had betrayed his family for a decade, watching his face in the moment he received confirmation that the operation was underway. The face of a man who thought he had one. Was the only evidence Jinwoo needed. Precious had one job the night of the operation. Stay in the safe location Jinwoo had moved her to that afternoon, a completely different building, with a completely different security arrangement, staffed by 4 people whose loyalty Jinwoo had verified personally and recently. One job. Stay. She lasted 2 hours. In her defense, and she would make this defense later at length, what she heard on the monitored channel at hour 2 was not something she could sit still for. One of the guards came to her quietly. Miss Davis. His voice was low and careful. There has been a development at the primary location. What kind of development? He hesitated. Tell me, she said. Director Lim did not come alone to the restaurant, he said. He brought 2 of Hyunsu's men. They are currently, he stopped. Mr. Kong is handling it. But the situation has escalated beyond the original parameters. Precious was already standing. Where is he? Miss Davis, my instructions are. I understand your instructions, she said. I'm asking where he is. The guard looked at her with the particular expression of someone caught between 2 extremely strong forces moving in opposite directions. The restaurant, he said finally. But please. She was already at the door. The restaurant was 12 minutes away. She knew because she counted. Jinho had materialized beside her in the lobby somehow. She was genuinely starting to believe he could teleport. And was driving with the controlled urgency of a man who had decided that if something was happening he was going to be there for it, and Miss Davis could not be left behind regardless of what the instructions said. How bad, she said. Contained, Jinho said. Tightly. That means not contained. He said nothing. Jinho. 2 men entered through the kitchen entrance, he said. They were expected. Mr. Kang's counter team was positioned. But Director Lim, he stopped. Director Lim produced information during the dinner that we were not prepared for. What information? Another pause. About you, he said quietly. About your family. Your mother. Her address in Atlanta. The car went very cold. He threatened my mother, Precious said. Jinho's jaw tightened. It was meant to neutralize Mr. Kang, he said. To create enough hesitation in the moment that the extraction could proceed. Did it work, she said. No, Jinho said. But the response, he stopped again. What? Mr. Kang's response to the information about your mother, Jinho said carefully, was not what Director Lim anticipated. What was it? He stood up from the table, Jinho said. Calmly. And he said, I am told these were his exact words. You have made the last mistake you will ever make. Precious closed her eyes briefly. And then things became complicated, Jinho said. But he is not hurt. I want you to know that first. He is not hurt. What about Lim? A pause. Director Lim, Jinho said carefully, is having a very difficult evening. She saw Jinwoo the moment she walked through the restaurant's private entrance. He was standing near the far wall talking into his phone in Korean, jacket still perfect, posture still immaculate, expression the controlled blankness she had learned to read as the aftermath of something he had just finished rather than something still in progress. He saw her the moment she entered. The phone call ended mid-sentence. He crossed the room toward her with the measured steps she knew so well, and he stopped directly in front of her and looked at her face with the specific attention of a man cataloging whether she was all right before allowing himself to be anything else. You were supposed to stay, he said. I know. Jinho was supposed to keep you there. Jinho tried. I see that. He looked over her shoulder briefly at Jinho, who had the expression of a man with absolutely nothing to say for himself. Then back at her. Are you hurt? I just arrived. You're the one who. Are you hurt? No. Are you? He looked at her. No, he said. Your mother's address, she said. Her voice was even, but the words cost something. They have my mother's address, Jinwoo. Had, he said immediately. Past tense. I made 3 calls from the table before I stood up. Your mother has security outside her home as of 40 minutes ago. She has not been told why and will not be alarmed. She is safe. Precious stared at him. You made 3 calls, she said, while sitting across from the man threatening her. I prioritize efficiently, he said. She laughed. It came out slightly broken and more emotional than she intended, and she covered her mouth with one hand, and Jinwoo watched her with those dark eyes, and something in his expression did the thing it sometimes did, opened, slightly, in the way that cost him something. Come here, he said quietly. And she did. She walked into him, and his arms came around her with the deliberate precision he applied to everything that mattered to him, and she stood in the middle of a restaurant where an hour ago men had tried to use her mother's address to compromise him, and she breathed. His hand moved to the back of her head. I'm sorry, he said into her hair. Low. Real. For which part? For making you a target by existing in my world. She pulled back enough to look at him. You didn't make me a target, she said. Seo Jin did. Lim did. Hyunsu did. You. She looked at his face. At the exhaustion and the control and the thing underneath both of those that she had been carefully not naming for 3 weeks. You protected me. Consistently. While dealing with a betrayal that would have broken most people. His jaw tightened. 20 years, he said quietly. I know. I built this with him. I know. And the entire time he was. Jinwoo. She said his name the way he said hers, like it was a decision. What did you do with him tonight? He was quiet for a moment. He has been delivered to the appropriate authorities, he said, with enough documented evidence to ensure he does not emerge from the process for a very long time. He paused. I did not do what I wanted to do. What did you want to do? His eyes were very dark. Something considerably less legal, he said. I'm glad you didn't. I know. That is the only reason I didn't. She looked at him. He looked at her. The restaurant was quiet around them in the specific way places went quiet after violence had moved through and left the survivors standing. There is still Hyunsu, Jinwoo said. I know. This is not finished. I know that too. Precious. He said her name carefully. What happened tonight? What Lim knew about your mother, your family, that is the level of exposure you are living with while you are connected to me. That is permanent. That is the reality of this. He looked at her steadily. I need you to understand that clearly. Not the version where you decide in a safe house kitchen. The real version. Where people find your mother's address and use it as leverage. The room was very still. Precious looked at Kang Jinwoo. At the man who had taken a bullet for her before he knew her name. Who had sent her cousin a spa voucher worth 4 figures because she was inconvenienced. Who had made 3 phone calls to protect her mother before standing up from a table to confront a traitor. Who had told her everything when he could have told her nothing and asked her to stay when every rational calculation said he should let her go. Do you want me to leave, she said. The question landed between them. He held her gaze. No, he said. The word came out stripped of everything. No control. No management. Just the honest center of it. No. I want you to stay so badly it has become a problem for my decision-making. A pause. Which is exactly why I keep giving you the option to go. She reached up and put her hand on his jaw. He went still the way he always did when she touched him without warning. Like his whole system needed a moment to process that something gentle was happening to him. I love you, she said. The restaurant was silent. His eyes changed. All the calculation. All the control. All the careful management of everything he was just gone for a moment. Just a man. Precious. I love you, she said again. And I'm not leaving. And the next time you give me the option to go while secretly hoping I stay, I need you to understand I am going to call that out every single time because I read people for a living and you are not as unreadable as you think you are. Something happened on his face that she had never seen before. Not the ghost of a smile. Not the almost. The real thing. Full. Unguarded. Devastating. You read people for a living, he repeated. I'm a librarian. We are extremely perceptive. He laughed. Short. Real. The laugh that existed only for her, the one she had been collecting evidence of for 3 weeks without telling him. Then his forehead came down against hers. His hand covered hers where it rested on his jaw. I love you, he said quietly. I have been trying to find the appropriate moment to say that for 2 weeks and there has not been one because my life does not produce appropriate moments. This is an appropriate moment. We are standing in a restaurant where I just had a man arrested. Jinwoo. Yes, this is an appropriate moment. He was quiet for a second. Yes, he said. It is. If this story is breaking your heart in the best possible way right now, hit that like button immediately. Subscribe if you are not already here. And drop a comment. When exactly did you know Precious and Jinwoo were inevitable? Was it the restaurant? The garage? The moment she didn't take the elevator? Tell me. I read every single one. Park Hyun-soo moved 3 days later. Not the way they expected. Not the way Jinwoo had prepared for. Which was, Precious would think later, the thing she should have anticipated, that the most dangerous move would be the one that didn't come through the front. It came through her phone. A message. Unknown number. 4 words. Come alone. Bring nothing. And then an address. And then a photograph. Vanessa. Again. The message came at 6 a.m. on a Friday, while Jinwoo was in the shower and Precious sat on the edge of the bed with her phone and felt the cold, specific weight of a decision that she could not share with him. Because she understood, immediately and completely, what Hyun-soo was doing. This was not about Vanessa. This was about Precious. Specifically about what Precious would do when the person she loved most in the world was threatened. And specifically about what Jinwoo would do when he found out. If she told him, and she understood Jinwoo well enough by now to know exactly what would happen, he would move with the full weight of the organization. Tactical. Overwhelming. And Hyun-soo, who had been building toward this for 4 years, would be ready for exactly that. The same intelligence that had given him Lim and the security rotation and her mother's address would have prepared him for Jinwoo's response pattern. He wasn't trying to neutralize Jinwoo militarily. He was trying to provoke him into a move that exposed him. Precious sat on the edge of the bed. She was a librarian from Los Angeles. She had survived a restaurant shooting and a parking garage ambush and a shipyard confrontation and 3 weeks of living inside a world that had no business containing her. She had discovered, considerably harder to break than anyone had anticipated. She typed one message to Jinho. I need to see you. Before Jinwoo comes out of the shower. Alone, what happened next was either the bravest or the most reckless thing she had ever done. She went to the address. Not without backup. Jinho had listened to everything she said and looked at the photograph and agreed, with the expression of a man who was going to have a very difficult conversation with his employer afterward, that she was right about the provocation strategy. She went with 2 of Jinho's people she trusted. Unarmed visibly. Monitored constantly. The address was a warehouse in an industrial district on the eastern edge of the city. Hyun-soo was there. He was not what she expected. Not large. Not overtly threatening. A Korean man in his 40s with a careful face and a very expensive suit and the specific quality of attention that she recognized because she had seen it on Jinwoo, the assessment, the categorization, the constant calculation. Vanessa sat against the far wall. Unhurt. Angry in the specific way of someone who is done being used as a piece in other people's games. Miss Davis, Hyun-soo said. Pleasantly. Like they were being introduced at a function. Thank you for coming. Where is my cousin? He gestured. One of his men stepped away from Vanessa. Precious looked at her cousin. Vanessa looked back at her with an expression that said, I have a lot to say about this situation, and I will be saying all of it later. You could have called, Precious said. Something moved through Hyun-soo's expression. I find direct communication more effective, he said. Then let's be direct. She looked at him. You don't want me. You want Jinwoo off balance and exposed. Using me is how you plan to do it. What I don't understand is why you think this works when Seo-jin already tried it. Hyun-soo studied her. Seo-jin used you as an insult, he said. I'm using you as something else. What? A message, he said. Not to Jinwoo. He looked at her carefully. To you. She waited. Walk away from him, Hyun-soo said simply. Not because I am threatening you. I think you understand by now that threats don't work on you particularly well. A slight smile. Because I am telling you something that is true. Jinwoo's war is not over when I am gone. There will always be someone else. Another Seo-jin. Another Lim. Another warehouse with someone you love sitting against the wall. He paused. You survived this world once because you were unexpected. You cannot be unexpected twice. The next person who uses you will be better prepared. The warehouse was quiet. So your message is, Precious said slowly, leave him. And you'll let us both live peacefully. Essentially. And if I say no? He looked at her for a long moment. Then we are enemies, he said. And I am considerably more patient than Seojin. Precious looked at him. At the careful face. At the reasonable voice. At the very specific manipulation dressed as concern. You know what I find interesting, she said. He waited. You brought me here to tell me to leave a dangerous man. And in doing so you kidnapped my cousin for the second time and proved that the world is dangerous whether I stay or go. She tilted her head slightly. So your argument is actually an argument for staying. Something shifted in his expression. Because at least with him, she continued, I know who is protecting me. I know the shape of the danger. I know that when someone finds my mother's address, a phone call has already been made before I find out. She looked at him steadily. You're asking me to trade known protection for unknown threat. And I'm a librarian. We don't make bad trades. The warehouse was completely silent. Then Hyun-soo did something she didn't expect. He smiled. Real. Genuine. The smile of a man who had just had something confirmed. He chose well, Hyun-soo said quietly. Before she could respond, before she could process what that meant, the warehouse doors opened. And Jinwoo walked in. He had found the message on her phone. She had left it on the bed. She was not sure later if she had done that accidentally or not. He walked in with Jinho and 4 others, and the specific quality of presence that made an already large warehouse feel considerably smaller. His eyes found her immediately, the way they always found her first in any room, the assessment running in half a second, unhurt, standing, herself, and then moved to Hyun-soo. The 2 men looked at each other. Years of war compressed into a single moment. Jinwoo, Hyun-soo said. Hyun-soo. Jinwoo's voice was the voice he used at the end of things. It's over. Hyun-soo looked at Precious one more time. Then back at Jinwoo. You understand what you're keeping, he said. Not a threat. Something more complicated. Yes, Jinwoo said. She told you everything she said to me. She left her phone on the bed, Jinwoo said. And Jinho answers to me. Precious made a mental note to have a detailed conversation with Jinho later. It's over, Jinwoo said again. Final. Absolute. Hyun-soo nodded slowly. The men beside him didn't move. I'm going to ask you one more time to release the woman against that wall, Jinwoo said. And then we are going to have a different conversation entirely. Vanessa was released. She crossed the warehouse floor to Precious and grabbed her arm and said nothing because for once in her life she understood that silence was the correct choice. What happened next took 4 minutes. Jinwoo's people moved with the precision of years and complete preparation. Hyun-soo's men, who were good, discovered that good was not sufficient. The entire operation collapsed inward with the specific efficiency of a plan that had been built to handle exactly this contingency. Park Hyun-soo was placed in restraints by a man half his age who looked almost apologetic about it. Jinwoo walked across the warehouse. He stopped in front of Precious. He looked at her. At the woman who had gone to a warehouse alone to protect him from a provocation. Who had stood in front of an enemy and argued philosophy. Who had left her phone on a bed where he would find it because she trusted him to come. You went alone, he said. I went with Jinho's people. You went without me. If you had come first, he would have had what he wanted, she said. You know that. His jaw was tight. Yes, he said. I know that. And your mother's address would have been the least of it. Precious. I'm not apologizing, she said. I made the right call and you know it. The warehouse was very still around them. Then Vanessa, from beside her, said quietly, she's not wrong. Jinwoo looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked back at him with the particular expression of a woman who had been kidnapped twice and was completely out of patience. She is categorically not wrong, Vanessa said. Jinwoo was quiet for a moment. Then he looked back at Precious. And he did something he almost never did. He conceded. No, he said quietly. She is not wrong. Hyun-soo's organization followed its leader into collapse over the subsequent weeks. Jinwoo moved with the kind of systematic precision that apparently came naturally to men who had been building toward a single outcome for 4 years and were finally allowed to execute it. Precious learned more about the infrastructure of organized crime in those weeks than she had ever wanted to know. She also, somewhere in the middle of it, started sleeping normally. Which was interesting. She thought about it one morning, the coffee, the kitchen, the window, the city, and she understood. She was sleeping normally because she was not waiting for the next thing anymore. Not braced. Not preparing. Not lying in the dark cataloging threats. She was simply in a life. A complicated, dangerous, unlikely, entirely hers life. Jinwoo came home at 7 that evening. She heard the door. She heard him set his phone on the counter. She heard him cross the kitchen. He stopped behind her at the window and looked out at the same view she was looking at. "It's done," he said. She turned to look at him. "Hyunsu." "All of it," he said. "The network. The assets. The remaining connections. Done." She looked at his face. At the man who had sat across from her at a restaurant 11 weeks ago with cold eyes and a dismissal she had pushed the money back across the table from. At the man who had covered her body with his in a gunfight before he knew anything about her except that she existed and therefore deserved protection. "What happens now?" she said. He reached into his jacket. She expected a phone. A report. Something. He placed a key on the counter beside her coffee cup. She looked at it. Small. Silver. Attached to a plain carrying with a single letter engraved in it. Not P. Not J. A K. For Kwon. She looked up at him. "This is not a key to this penthouse," she said carefully. "No," he agreed. "This is a question," he said. "If you want to answer it." She looked at the key. At the man. At the city that had tried to destroy both of them repeatedly and failed every single time. She thought about a library in Los Angeles and vending machine chips and a blind date she had almost canceled and a woman who had decided 3 weeks into the most dangerous experience of her life that leaving felt worse than staying. She picked up the key. Jinwoo watched her. "I'm going to need my books moved," she said. Something crossed his face. "All of them," she said. "I have significant books. It is a significant operation." "I have people," he said. "They'll need to be careful. Some of them are old. They will be careful." She looked at him. He looked at her. The city blazed through the windows behind them, the same city that had watched a plus-sized black librarian sit alone in an elite restaurant and be told she was the joke, and had watched her become, instead, the reason the most feared man in its underworld finally had something to protect that wasn't built from violence. "Jinwoo," she said. "Yes. If anyone kidnaps my cousin one more time, I am handling it personally." The smile came. Full. Real. Unguarded. The one she had been collecting evidence of since the beginning. "Noted," he said. She took his hand. He held it the way he held everything that mattered to him, carefully, completely, like something he could not believe belonged to him and was not yet certain he deserved. "Kay," she said, looking at the keyring. "Kwon," he said. "I know what it means." "Do you?" She looked up at him. "It means you're asking me to be a Kwon," she said. He was very still. "It means," he said quietly, "that if you want to be, there is nothing in this world or the one running underneath it that would stop me from making that possible." Precious Davis stood in a penthouse kitchen in Seoul with a key in her hand and a man beside her who had dismantled 3 criminal organizations, survived 4 assassination attempts, protected her mother from a distance, sent her cousin a spa voucher, sat on a nursery floor checking crib legs, and said "I love you" for the first time in a restaurant where he had just had someone arrested. She thought about the woman who had almost not come to dinner. She was glad she came. She was glad she stayed. She tightened her hand around the key. "Yes," she said simply. And that was enough. That was everything. The city moved outside. Los Angeles blazing and alive and entirely unaware of what had just been decided in a penthouse 43 floors above its streets. Precious Kwon. The words were new and enormous and entirely right. Jinwoo stood beside the woman who had walked into his world and refused, quietly, consistently, with complete dignity, to be anything less than exactly who she was. And for the first time in his life, the world did not feel like something to be survived. It felt like something to be lived, asterisk. And that is the end of Precious and Jinwoo's story. She came as a joke. She left as a Kwon. And he came as a weapon. He left as a man. If this story did something to you, and I believe it did, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you are not already here because there are more stories coming that will hit just as hard. And drop a comment below. Did you see the ending coming? Were you Team Precious from the beginning? Tell me exactly when you knew these two were inevitable. I read every single one. And I will see you in the next story.